Hello. I wanted to show you that I was working on a drawing. I was seated at the table in our dining area, and I just wanted a subject to draw. So rather than a portrait or draw my hand, I decided to draw the couch in front of me and the chair and another couch and the landing and a few other things. Now, I told you I went to college for art, not for placations ending or staycations ending. I think the reason why it was up to me to end staycations was that it had to do with my cousin, Johnny Depp. And so I guess they were just these spirits or whatever, these in spirit form people really forced me to do it. And it ended for me. But the thing is, a man walked into the place where I was. He proceeded through the door, opened up, walked up to the counter, flipped the counter like I saw it in my mind. It didn't really happen. Flipped it open like there was a hinge on one side. He flipped it over, walked down, but it was like a dun 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 dun, not a straight across. He was went down a small ramp, and then I heard something like a generator, like a gas generator start up. So somebody else had in mind to close up these heavenly realms that have become places for movies and for what the the one of the good voices of Michael Hayworth was saying, "You're being jagged." And the reason why I was surprised he would inform me of this, and also inform me as though he was like, there, you're welcome, is because I believe his wife was one of the people jagging me. And so it was really weird, but it was his voice anyhow. And I looked on a license plate of a Suburban that was parked nearby as I walked down the sidewalk in Albany, New York. And that license plate read JAG, JAG, Judge Advocate General. And Jesus had been telling me the U.S. Navy is corrupt and needs to be disbanded. Once that happens, a lot of these heavenly realms that people use as their hotspots will even out. There won't be so much danger within them. And people will likely not be able to commit these crimes that were going on in there. So, I was at home not doing anything, and I guess my family must have designated me the one called to do it, but really it isn't. I was able to do it, but it was an accident how it happened. And so actually somebody is really trying to overturn this, but that's not what it's about. It's about getting it done and however it gets done. So obviously this is somebody that didn't want it to close and didn't want it to get better, but somebody who's probably not understanding that the United States would be in peril if it didn't close. And they are ignorant of our freedoms here in the United States. And, you know, they wanted it to stay open, so they're trying to prove that, trying to make it appear as though it didn't close at all. And I think it's just generator running it. So maybe it's best if everybody leave staycations, denounce staycations, and don't go back in. But uh, remember, I was at the Stewart's Shops in upstate New York on Erie Boulevard when I was looking at my friend's Facebook account, and for whatever reason, I was purposefully being led to believe that my friend had had an affair with my somebody that I was supposed to have been at least engaged to, and I was probably just so they could get the result they wanted. And I saw this amulet around her son's neck, and I saw that they had been to, I think, Universal Studios or something, and it was just a trinket. But I was mad, and I felt like everything had been taken from me, and not just from that particular person. And I grabbed it mentally, not even reaching at the screen. I mentally said, "This is my cousin's," and I handed it to him, not knowing. So I handed it to my cousin, basically thinking about the courtroom that he and Amber Heard were in. The music in the Stewart Shops stopped abruptly. Some things started moving, gears turning, squeaking, and things like that, like an old rusty machine. And I heard a man's voice say, he said, "I don't do wheelies, but I said if staycations ended, I would do a wheelie." And then it was just, and it wasn't this obnoxious, loud noise, but this rider wearing all black and having an all black, shiny motorcycle did a wheelie by the Stewarts, going towards Schenectady, not away from Schenectady. And very shortly thereafter is when that man came in. I can only say he appeared to be wearing New Balance sneakers that were white with a dark logo on them. And he was the one that I could see in my mind. He, he flipped the countertop up and walked down a short ramp that was steep, and started the generator up. But in my world, in my actual world, he walked in and he was proceeding to the counter to talk to the employees. And oftentimes when I go in there, the employees would change shifts so often, and, or they would suddenly pile in, and there was like 5 employees for one Stewart Shops. And I said I was going to call their manager because, where I made it sound like I was familiar with their functioning, because I said there's only supposed to be 2 customer service representatives running these stores. You're supposed to do it all. I said, I know, I applied for a job here and I went to orientation, and I sort of scolded them because they were treating the homeless badly. And this isn't a posh neighborhood, this is a poor area. And to come in and pretend like we're making the scene look ugly when I'm just seated having a meal is, you don't understand what loitering is. And they're saying, oh, well, if you got a job, you wouldn't be loitering. And, make up your mind. Am I accursed? Am I called to end staycations? Am I, am I a mentally ill extra in somebody's true life movie. So um, they they also work with their mind, which I think it was my nephew said. It's called mind bending, and then when you can telekinesis with your mind, it's called air bending. And so I said, I remember seeing this last airbender a few times at the shelter, but it didn't remind me anything of what I was doing. But I guess, it was sort of like artist creative liberties. So um, I wanted to be an elementary school art teacher. And actually, there was this charter school in Pinellas Park, Florida, that I applied for a job at. And they said, we would love to hire you, because I said how close I lived, and I would work for very low pay, and I just wanted the importance was to work and to do what I loved working. And they said we would hire you in an instant, but we just cut our budget. He's like, please check back with us. He said we are. I forget what he said. The certain nuances having to do with charter school budgets or whatever, but he said, they are the first to go is arts and sports and theater and things like that. He said, but we would take you. He said, call me back, but I needed something then and there. My brother left, and I think a whole lot of people were commissioned to end staycations, and I'm only recently finding out that 70s show was involved in it too. The cast from that 70s show, just like I said, or they gave Ernest Hemingway a spy job that did him in. It's sort of like, no, you you have to have you have to go to the school of hard knocks, and those people really have behaved criminally, where it's like, well, I think you ought to do more in life than just write poetry and make easy money. That's what I was talking about, the band Dire Straits. Money for nothing and your chicks for free. They don't like that certain jobs are not like the amount of money you make are not equal with how many droplets of sweat you uh, push out while you're doing it. And a thinking job is not a job at all, they think. But I decided when I was young that I wanted to be an artist, and I was doing well with it because I had practiced at home, and then I started my schooling, and right away we had to see what everybody excels in. Um, and we had a contest, and I formed a clay duck because we had ducks on our property, and our teacher must have given us the ideas, and I went with that one, and I won second prize right away. I was 4 years old and won second prize. And then I was in sixth grade, probably around 12 years old, and I won first prize, I think, or second prize. That's pretty good, being competing with the whole school. And then I went to seventh grade, which is a different building, and there was no middle school like there is in a lot of places. So we went straight to the high school location, and I was in classes with upperclassmen. And I would say that is a great idea when teaching, is as far as arts goes, I think it's good to have upperclassmen integrated into your classroom doing their projects. It's such an inspiration. But not only that, it challenges the students to. I mean, I was an underclassman and I was really impressing a lot of the upperclassmen with my work. And then actually, I found out a couple of them became they are art teachers or like professors of art. And it's weird how I saw one and his style hadn't changed. Not that it was ever needing change. I'm just saying it was like our handwriting. And so his hasn't changed and mine hasn't either, because this is what I was doing then. Shading, I like quick, get it out and get it mapped out. Hold it back. Does it look halfway decent? Halfway decent's good enough for me. Time to start my favorite part, the shading. And so this is just a Paper Mate um, Wright Brothers 1 point, I think that's a zero tip uh, pen. I mean, it's just a regular pen for writing with, but I was challenged by my seventh grade. He was still an art teacher. They're not professors until college, but I suppose if they said, I teach at the college and you can call me professor, then you could get used to um, that setting. But he said, he said, pencil's good. Like he liked my work, but he was also, these teachers were such sticklers. And so I went from one stickler to the next, and each one had their own, thing that they were about. This particular teacher, we did a lot of work with pencil, and he said, that's one way you can do it. And then for some reason, it was brought up again when I went to my next grade up. So Mr. Lopez was my seventh grade art teacher, and Mrs. Herodes was eighth, ninth. Does that make sense? Maybe Mr. Lopez was seventh and eighth, and then Herodes was 9, 10, 11, 12, maybe. And she said the same thing. She goes, "No, this is really good. This is how I really think you need to be." She said, "Nobody's like this anymore. They all use well, at the time she didn't get into chamois, like it's a little piece of rubber, and it smooths it and gives it this real solid, smooth, like marble finish. And your portraiture is even more amazing because skin is that way, smooth. But, I'm doing a depiction of somebody. And so I like to show off the intricate shading that I can do. So I mean, my teachers really liked it. And my problem is I go through long stretches where I do not draw, paint, and really a true artist, you're always drawing and painting. You never really stop. But if you understand that not every situation makes it easy, I never really did stop. I was looking at things like an artist. I was studying a lot of photography because it's already got a good composition. So we didn't have cell phones then, but I would buy magazines and pull out certain pictures that I liked and hang on to them. I would keep them in a magazine. A lot of Obsession for Men commercials in magazines, I held on to them. I pulled them out of there. Not just because the perfumes were on the paper, but they were, I was a young girl growing up, and it was, we didn't have, we had to study the human form based on certain magazines. And of course, I wasn't allowed to look at Playboy or anything. So I wanted to do portraiture, and I would order from like Montgomery Wards or whatever and go to the men's section. And then let's say the picture was maybe the picture of the man, and they were advertising underwear. So he would be maybe this big, but I wanted to put him on a piece of paper that big, really celebrate the male form. And so my teacher taught us a class where you draw a grid. You make, let's just say I made this 5 squares across, and I made it 10 squares down. You would do the proper measurement, and this would be 5 squares, and then, or 10 squares down and 5 squares across as well. But there's a little bit more to it than just that. And so I really would like those coloring books, where I would really do like this, where it would be um, cell one, okay, and then I would go to mine and put that line and add that. I didn't skip around though. I mean, I wasn't that, and then I would just proceed and proceed. How I was doing it, it was basic, and it wasn't exact because the paper has to match the right dimensions to blow up the photo. But it was good enough, like I said, it was good enough to impress people when they saw it. But as you go on in your skills and you go on to college, there are oftentimes several points that you have to make in order to have all of it uh, to get a good grade. And we'd be surprised at something like this where people are like, wow. And somebody might say, yes, but this was a you were supposed to do a 1 point perspective, and this is, or something, and they could say you didn't check off everything you were supposed to do. So I'll give you 75, and everyone's like, wow, um, but by college, everybody's pretty much really good at doing something where you look at it and you're impressed. But like I said, as you go on in college, you have to be just as good at other following directions. For one thing, you have to follow the directions, so you have to meet all the professor's criteria, and you have to use whatever medium that they say in the right way. And they can usually tell if you've um, like, for example, if you've made mud, and you mixed your paint wrong, and now it's just mud because it's brown. You've mixed primary colors together, and you it wasn't to make a tree trunk or something, So in critiquing art is part of how I was able to. I mean, some people know how to pick people apart, and I do know how to do that, but I mostly uh, I want to observe things, not pick the person apart. But sometimes that happens when you're observing things, of course. So I'm still deciding if I want to color it all in. I'm trying not to be so heavy-handed. It's not all one color. It's gotta flow, but I don't want it to be too busy either. So yes, I did very well even in college, but I mean, I was nervous. I hadn't drawn anything in years. And then here I was, I received my materials from the bookstore and um, didn't do anything. I had no assignment. Went to class, and then it was an instant still life. But what's really maddening is parts of the still life were donated by the ceramics class. And so the ceramics are not symmetrical. And so you have to convince the people looking at your work, well, I didn't get the ellipse right because it was not a symmetrical piece of pottery, or, there was something off about the pottery. And I learned some new words though. They were like, oh, that's so organic. And it would be a plaster cast of an ear. And for some reason, when I drew my ear, it did come out looking like real, like skin and things. And I didn't intend it. And everybody just kept saying, every time you draw something, it looks organic. And so I finally had to understand, like they mean um, like it's alive, like flesh and blood, or that it would be a real plant, even though it's totally an artificial plant. And they were able to capture the look of the artificial plant, and I couldn't. I was making it look real for some reason. So our professor was a real stickler in light, reflected light, and then he says, "I can tell that you moved it because this, and nobody's supposed to touch the still life, and this is." There was I was observing because my mother, my mother didn't really know anything. She was just trying to help me. And I'd be, Mom, can you help me with this? And she's like, "Ah, don't draw. I don't draw." And it was like, I didn't hear that. I didn't hear her say that. So I would bother her all day long. Can you please just help me draw this? Well, yes, you can. Well, because you can. And she's like, you can. But she goes, just draw what you see. And everybody's trying to encourage me because I would draw things so fast and then it would come out pretty good for a child. And draw what you see. And I would start to really look at just these magazine pictures of things, and I would see this, and I'm like, Mom, I I know it's a circle and this is dark, but this has to be light. And I was like, and sometimes I would see the whole edge was pure white on something, and this would be dark blue, for example, and this is a lighter blue. And uh, I was so proud of myself for being able to keep myself from coloring it all in and leaving that one line and being like, that's realism. I am I am I am a realism artist. I have captured realism, you know. And I was just, it was more and more encouragement to keep going with it. So I don't know. I don't have any friends. So YouTube became my friend. My recordings became my friend. I started out, I might be at a bus stop and I didn't like what was around me, or that it was getting to be night, and then I was taking a bus to a homeless shelter, having to be there by 5. So that's how dark it gets. By the time we were brought into this free shelter, but it's sort of like first come first serve. Um, it was 5:30 was dark out, and all the lights were on in the parking lot across the street. So I had to get back, and I didn't like being in the dark trying to navigate it. And one day I was finally got into a different shelter than the drop-in center, and I was trying to draw my leaves that I just picked up some leaves and I was drawing them. And this woman snapped the light off. And I hardly ever can remember rules, but I remembered this one. I said, "Hey, it's not lights out till 11." And she said, "Actually, it's a weekend, so it's lights out at 10." And I said, "Well, why do you have to follow that rule right now? You're on hold on the phone." And she started coming at me. She rolled out of her bed and was headed towards me. And all I could do was say, "You come any closer to me, I'm going to shove this pencil in your eye." And they took it as me being really psychotic and coming up with sick, cruel, and unusual punishment for this lady who was only following the rules. And I just said, and the thing is, though, that worker, she ran up the stairs and immediately she rushed at me and placed that gun-shaped COVID monitor to my forehead, and and I was like, "What is this?" And I got thrown out. The police got involved, and I got thrown out. And they're like, "But you gotta calm down, stop yelling, calm down, and stop yelling." And so that's how I started to get every single time, because it was so outrageous. And that's when people started saying it's staycations. Playcations is this other thing entirely. And so it did play out like an orchestrated movie. And I just, when that happens, a lot of people, they go to their medicine cabinet and pop a pill. How can you handle it? They know it's contrived, but how did they know and how did they do it? And so Jesus talked to me and said, "I'm going to put a stop to this." And instead, everybody wanted Armageddon instead of just giving it a rest. And they knew they weren't supposed to do this, but they acted like, well, it's sort of like now they're enforcing the no, you can't. It never used to be this way, but now they're saying, "Hey, we've got a handicap parking spot that everybody's been using because it's convenient, but there are people now that need it." And instead, they know it's a law. They know they've been getting away with it, and instead of of respecting this, they're disrespecting it and turning it into a Trump rally, uh, but Jerry Springer style. And and they didn't have to make it this level of violence, and um, it didn't have to change this way. And so it was a bunch of people that were, if you ask me, they were suicidal and homicidal. So this woman was exaggerating, being on hold because she needed to get her government, um, what do they call it? The economic stimulus payment from the IRS. And she was on hold with the IRS, waiting to talk to a person, keeping it on a loud speakerphone. So we all have to feel for her during this process. And I just chose to, I sat on my bed. And first of all, I think everybody was mad because they're trying to portray me as this 9 foot tall Amazon. And I laid my feet across the bed, and they actually went right to the edge of the bed on a this direction. And I was leaning up against the wall on a bunk bed, on the bottom bunk of a bunk bed. And so immediately, she's not a 9 foot tall the female version of Jack Reacher. She's not Paul Bunyan's female counterpart. Why no? And those falsies were from getting pregnant and having babies, and that means I'm not trans, and I wasn't a hermaphrodite either. Was born a female. It's just that I play the role of a man a couple times on my YouTube really well, and it's as if I'm almost, well, you wouldn't know it was me. You just wouldn't know. And I can play the role of an elderly person very well. And see, so I really qualified for this staycations ending thing too. And I didn't know that the actual CIA was interested in people like me. And I was already schizophrenic, but my brother's ex wife's aunt was in the CIA. And she said, no, we would definitely have taken her. As I don't know, that was a technical term. But I was I felt like my head might be this big, but I was this big within my head. It was a whole lot of room. And if everything was like on a soundboard, mm, it might be on concert hall as the choice for the filter. It was that way. And I felt unforgiven by God. And so I had this horrible sense of impending doom with this dead man walking feeling. And then one day, Jesus, he spoke to me the right way and he said, no, the man that braids his beard was the one that overkilled you. He said, it's the result of this that I am shutting it all down. And would you like to help? But you can say no, and you're not sinning to say no. And see, that was in Florida. So then I come to New York, and New York had already been whopped for about 9 years before that with everything. Well, anticipated that I would be the one to do it. And they actually made it where everything I was watching on TV was coming around and becoming real for them. And they were literally living in everything I watched on TV. So they hated me. It was mostly my family, but not exclusively. They absolutely hated me. They wanted me to go do something else other than watch TV. And they were hit with one thing after another, after another, after another. And so, well, anyhow, people think America has exposed the earth or the simple peoples to this type of entertainment, but they ought to check out other countries, because I think it was Switzerland or Sweden where marijuana was totally legal. They made gourmet meals out of marijuana. You get high all day if you want. Um, the weather is often, I mean, a lot of the TV is nude. They were mostly nude delivering the weather or whatever, and they just get used to it, and it's like no big deal. The whole family undresses in front of one another, and here they are trying to blame America for all of it. And I could hear some, I don't know if they were Saudis or not, but I could hear some people that were saying that the influence America had on them, where their wedding receptions are being held and they're, jumping up and down and they're crashing through 3 and 5 story buildings because the structure can't handle it. Is they just say, well, they get what they deserve. There's these rather strict in, what do you call it? Fundamentalists in their own right. We're doing it. So I'm going to interrupt my own self and say, this is what being an arts major is like in a lot of classes. And you get to know your